So we're recording now. Shalom, my name is Rabbi Johnny Solomon. I'm a teacher and writer with a passion for Jewish learning, Jewish books, and Jewish law. Over the years, I've read and reviewed many books of Jewish interest. And I recently came to the realization that rather than me trying to summarize the intentions of an author in a fairly brief book review, it would likely be much more beneficial to interview authors about the books that they've written. With this in mind, I'm delighted to welcome Ronen Neuwirth to talk about his recently published book, available in Hebrew as Gesher Halacha, Psikat Halacha B'dor postmodern, and in English with the title, The Narrow Halachic Bridge, A Vision of Jewish Law in a Postmodern Age. So welcome, Ronen.
Thank you.
Before we discuss your book, can you tell us a little about yourself, where you were born, and what you're currently doing?
Shalom, Rabbi Johnny. Thank you so much for the opportunity. So I'm Israeli, as you can hear from my accent. I was born and raised here. I was actually serving in the past 15 years as a community rabbi in various places. And this year, I took a break of communal work to finish this work on my book, which I started about 5 years ago, the research and collecting the sources and the writing. And I decided to publish the book in Hebrew and English, and what I'm mainly doing now is promoting my book. I was supposed to lecture in many places. Obviously, the coronavirus has changed the plans of many of us, but I'm doing my work mainly online now with publishing and so on and so forth. I'm also beginning my PhD very soon in September, and please God, at some point, I believe I'll go back to the pulpit, Rabbanut, the community, to become a community rabbi again, because it's in my blood. But as of now, I'm enjoying every single second of the break and the research and the writing process.
Beautiful. Well, lovely to meet you. We're formally meeting for the first time, and thank you for this opportunity for me to get to know you and also your book. So as mentioned, you've recently published a fascinating book, which for the purpose of this recording, I'll refer to with the English name, The Narrow Halachic Bridge, which addresses a topic very close to my heart and seeks to do, I think, three things. Firstly, The Narrow Halachic Bridge teaches the reader about the halachic process and the tools available to a posek in rendering halachic decisions. Secondly, it seeks to celebrate the possibility of creativity within Orthodox halacha, while also highlighting how too few of the great halachic decisors of recent generations have maximized these opportunities. And finally, it seeks to raise an urgent distress call to all those who care about halacha that more needs to be done to bridge the gap between halacha as taught and decided and halacha as needed in this postmodern age. Rav Ronen, is this a fair summary of what you're trying to achieve in the narrow halachic bridge?
You know, it's very interesting. It's a great summary. It's a great summary of a rabbi, and I'm sure that you, as a rabbi, that's what you got. Because I'm definitely speaking about the better understanding of the halachic process, about the possible creativity, within framework of halacha, and how can we bridge the gap in our generation. But as I write in the introduction, my target audience is not just Rabbanim, and I'm sure rabbis can benefit from the book, but it's mainly for the tzibur, for the public, to take that back box of Psikat Halacha and to open the box and expose it to people, because what I see and what I feel, that in our generation, people are losing trust. The Balabatim are losing trust in the halachic system. The more we face challenges in our culture, challenges of postmodernism, people lose their faith and trust in the ability of the halachic system of the rabbis to respond to the current challenges. And that was actually the major purpose of my book, not just for rabbis. I did it first of all for myself. I enjoyed the process and the journey. It was an amazing, personal journey. But for me, the major concern was the people, the Balabatim. That's my goal. I want as many people as possible to read the book, to believe in the halachic system. The halachic system is what I believe brought us till today. Both of us, we live here in Israel after 2,000 years of Galut because of the halachic system. Much more than we observed the halacha protected us throughout generations. And we need to keep that system. And today, what I believe and what I see, that this system is under risk. And the challenges we are facing are not less than what we were facing 100 years ago with the emergence of Enlightenment and Haskalah, and later on secular Zionism. It's a major junction in Jewish history, postmodernism. And if in the past, the approach of the rabbis was most of rabbinical world, let's build bigger walls and taller walls around the Torah, and that's how we can protect the world of Torah from all these foreign influences. Today, there's no possible practical way to block the influence, and unless we have a vision for the future, we might encounter a huge challenge, even catastrophe for halacha. And that was basically the goal of writing the book, like to strengthen the trust of the people, the Balabatim in the halachic system. And my major claim, you spoke, like when you mentioned before, you spoke about the need to build a bridge. I believe that by definition, halacha is the bridge. Halacha was always the bridge. Hashem gave us a Torah, the Torah Mishamayim, Torah from heaven, from Sinai, and that Torah is untouchable. We cannot touch one single letter from the Torah, from the given Torah, the Torah from Sinai. However, the Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral Torah, is our Torah. If we all remember the story in the Gemara and Baba Metzia about Rabbi Eliezer and the sages of the machloket, the dispute about the oven of Achnai, and Rabbi Eliezer brought all proofs from heaven that God supported him. Mm-hmm. And Rabbi Yeshua said, we could not care less. Lo b'shamayim, it's not in heaven. Halacha, the Torah Shebaal Peh was given to us, and it's supposed to serve as a bridge between the Torah Shebichtav and reality. The Torah Shebichtav, the written Torah, will never be changed. Reality, life is dynamic, is always changing by definition. Therefore, the halacha is a bridge. Halacha was always evolving. Halacha was always corresponding with reality. It never surrendered to the weaknesses of reality, but at the very same time, it never ignored them. It was a nuanced dance of building the bridge. And in that sense, halacha is what gives the Torah the eternity, because the Torah can be adaptable to each and every generation because of the halacha. Halacha was the bridge. And that's, I believe, the major crisis in our times, because the gap, reality was always changing, but in a slow pace. And halacha in a much slower pace. That's why we call it halacha. It's walking slowly. It's holech, lalechek. But in our times, reality is changing in such a rapid pace. Societal, technological changes that are happening in just 5 years, in the past, happened in the span of 50, 100 years. Take the social media. It has completely transformed our life. You remember lives without Facebook, without social media 15 years ago? Mm-hmm. It's a totally different, way of life, way of thinking. Who knows what will happen 10 years from today, 20 years from today, 50 years from today? Reality is changing in such a rapid pace. Rabbinical leadership, because of the confusion, is kind of pulling backwards and trying again to build taller walls against this influence. And the gap is growing bigger literally every single day. And that's why there's an acute need to build a bridge now. And I think this is basically what the book is all about, like to give people, the readers of the book, not just rabbis, the faith and the trust in the halachic system, that this is a beautiful system that has kept us and protected us till this very day. It has a room, it can answer and respond to all the challenges that we are facing now. And in 50 years from today, we just need to realize what are the ways to do it. And I'm not saying I have all the answers. I was trying to suggest a vision, but the most important thing is let's start speaking about the future. Instead of fighting the wars of the past, of yesterday, let's think about tomorrow together. Whatever our shkafa is, rabbis, leaders, lay leaders, communities, let's think about the vision, future of Judaism, future of halacha. That's basically the book in essence.
Well, firstly, thank you. I think you answered much of my next question, but that word vision does come up quite often in your book, and you are trying to outline a visionary halacha which emerges from the bestest examples of halachic creativity. But you're also highlighting concerns. I want to quote a line from your book. You say in the introduction, it is highly doubtful that the accepted answers that have endured and sufficed for past generations will be able to provide ample solutions for the coming generations. And you've just now kind of alluded to that, how social media has developed, and that means things that we were doing previously may not necessarily be good enough today. Now, what in your opinion is so unique about the current and coming generations? Social media is one phenomenon. Are there anything else? When you use the term postmodernism, what do you think is challenging, shall we say, the way in which orthodoxy is lived and the way in which halacha is decided? Where do you think the gap is now, and where do you think the gap may be in the future?
Okay, so I can define it in a very simple way. Do you remember what's the phrase that Bnei Israel said when we accepted the Torah in our Sinai? We always praise Bnei Israel for saying Na'aseh v'nishma. What is Na'aseh v'nishma? Na'aseh v'nishma is total, unqualified acceptance, commitment to observe the Torah. And this is basically halacha. Halacha is based on two major factors which are intertwined. One of them is commitment to halacha, like unqualified commitment. The other one is acceptance of the authority of rabbis, of the halachic decisors, of the halachic poskim. And these two together comprise the halacha. So the rabbis in all generations transmitted halacha, and people that wanted to be part of the Jewish community followed halacha. And there were different sanctions and institutions and establishments to ensure that people are staying within that framework. If I need to explain postmodernism in 1 second, what I would say, postmodernism is rejection of authority. Postmodernism is rejection of commitment. People want to have options. You see it in the smallest things, even in the plan of mobile phone that you have, that people don't want to make any long-term commitment. Mm-hmm. Obviously, professions, jobs, everything. We live in a world that people don't want to make any long-term commitment. And obviously, rejection of authority. People know when you go to you have an appointment with the doctor about an illness. Before you enter his office, sometimes you know much more than him because you've done the research online. That's what people know so much. People have accessibility to knowledge. Knowledge in the past was the power. That was the source of authority. But people know today, and even if they don't know, they can acquire the knowledge in a blink of an eye. And therefore, people reject authority. People reject commitment. And these are the very foundations of halacha. So how can we continue transmitting halacha? It's not even about changing halacha. And I write many times in the book that making halacha like easier, lighter, so this has never solved the problem. The question now is, how can we transmit halacha when the tools for transmitting halacha are non-existent? And furthermore, and that's the last, there are many more elements, but last element which I want to share, the one thing which is very clear in postmodern reality, there's no absolute truth. Mm-hmm. Only it's a world of relativism. Everything is relative. And halacha basically, apparently, well, I wish to claim in the book that it's not so simple, but many times we think that halacha is very dogmatic and there's one way, and that way represents the truth of God. And how can you deal with halacha when you live in a culture with no absolute truth? When someone tells you this is the way, there's no other option. Mm-hmm. So all these elements are challenging the halachic systems, the very foundations of the halachic system. And that's what I'm trying to analyze in the book, and also, again, suggest ways, creative ways of how we can transmit halacha in a way that will be effective, will be productive and positive, despite the major challenges and the lack of tools that we that we experience in our times due to the postmodernism.
So thank you so much for clarifying that. You know, in the conversation we had just before we started recording, I explained how this is a topic that I myself had taken an interest in some years ago, and there are a few essays on similar topics, but I think what you've done is try to present a comprehensive view, not just of the halachic process as how law has been decided and can be decided, but also trying to then see how that applies to contemporary issues with an understanding of and sensitivity to postmodernism. But I do want to go back to something that you alluded to just right at the beginning. You said we're both living in Israel right now, and you make considerable reference to Medinat Israel, to the state of Israel. And you seem to suggest that the state of Israel is a force to nudge towards greater confidence in halachic decision-making, not only, but in addition to the challenges we've spoken about regarding postmodernism. So what role does Medinat Israel play both in your book and in your vision of halacha?
Okay. You know, to begin with, let's speak about numbers. Mm-hmm. Okay. About 75 years ago, the Holocaust, the biggest catastrophe of the Jewish people, ended with a total of 6 million Jews that perished in the Holocaust. 3 years later, 1948, 600,000 Jews lived in Israel, which is the same number of the Jews living in Egypt. That's that. By the way, I mentioned this in the Gemara, in the book, that the Gemara said that that's a number to form a nation. Minimal number to form a nation is 600,000 Jews, and that happened in 1948. Now, 72 years later, in the year 2020, there are about 6.7 million Jews living in Israel. Mm-hmm. So we added to the Israeli population 6 million Jews that we lost. And furthermore, it's now first time since the destruction of the first temple that the biggest concentration of Jews is in Israel. In a few years' time, probably within the coming 10 years, the majority of Jews will be living in Israel. First time since the destruction of the first temple. If you ask me, this is the biggest miracle in Jewish history, much more than Kriyat Yam Suf, and it's happening in our lifetime. And sometimes because it's so natural, we don't see the greatness of the miracle, but that's a huge miracle. And if you just learn history and go back to the 19th century in Europe and see all the programs, like, it is unbelievable what we have today. And that unbelievable miracle has also consequences on the halachic process. Mm-hmm. We need to remember that 2,000 years ago, when the exile officially started, it started with the decision of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai of Ten Liyavne v'Chachamea. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a visionary. He realized we lost the war. We don't have sovereignty anymore, but we have the Torah. And the Torah is our survival. And the Torah is the tool, the thing with which we will survive till the end of the Galut, till the end of exile. Mm-hmm. And therefore, he made some takanot, some enactments, and as Chazal described in Masechet Brachot, since the day of the destruction, the Torah got limited in 4 cubits of halacha. Basically, the Torah of 2,000 years of exile is a Torah of defense mode, trying to defend the Jewish people from all foreign influences, from assimilation, from catastrophes, trying to keep the heritage, the legacy, the people, the nation. We lived in a survival mode without even having the ability to have a vision, to envision, to see the future. we fought against any foreign influence. Mm-hmm. Now we are back in our nation, finally. And Rav Kook, well, this is the vision of Rav Kook, which I'm trying to explain at length in the last chapters of the book, that we need to unpack the process of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. It doesn't mean that we can change halacha, but instead of being in a reactionary mode. By the way, take the word Haredi. What is the source of the word Haredi? Fear. It was a Judaism of fear, of Shema, of Chashash. There are so many fears of, we need to block and make the world taller because of all these foreign influence. Now we have our own country. So yes, it's not a religious country per se, but it's a Jewish country. There is so much Jewish identity here. Every Jewish child knows exactly, living in Israel, regardless of the level of observance, when Rosh Hashanah is taking place, what are the customs of Rosh Hashanah, of Yom Kippur, of Shavuot. How many Jewish children living in America, not within the religious circle, know when Shavuot is taking place? What is Shavuot at all? Mm-hmm. We need to unpack what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did and build halacha with vision, not just fighting against foreign different influences, but having a vision for how do we want to see a Jewish nation. Now, I'm not reinventing the wheel. It has done, I'm by the way, mentioning in the book many psakim of Rav Shaul Israeli, and there were many others that paved the path. It's there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to realize that this is supposed to be the major path in our times, the path of psikaf vision and not psikaf fear.
So firstly, thank you so much for taking us on that journey and explaining so much about what's inspired you. I just want to point out, as I mentioned, the book exists both in Hebrew and in English. I don't think you'll find for English readers such a wealth of collections of both halachic teachings and also teachings from a range of rabbis, including religious Zionist rabbis like Rabbi Israeli, whose ideas are now in English elsewhere, meaning those writings exist in Hebrew, and you've done people a great service by not just writing the book, but also giving these sources to English readers for them to appreciate the teachings of Rav Kook, Rabbi Israeli, and many others, and demonstrate how their vision and how their ideology, as well as their approach to halacha, has given an impetus to consider how Judaism can develop for the future here in Israel, but also to benefit Jews across the world. I want to move on to a different topic. You talk about a whole range of modern issues, and one of the topics you treat in the book, you treat in the narrow halachic bridge, is the role of women. And you make an interesting statement, and I'm going to quote it as follows. You say, advancing women standing within halacha is not a liberal, feminist, progressive trend. And the demand for equality and for rights should not be seen as something that threatens halacha. Now, I think I have a sense of what you mean, but I'm curious if you can explain to others what you mean, because hearing that advancing women standing within halacha is not a liberal, feminist, progressive trend, some people would say, I'm not so convinced with that statement. What do you mean by that?
Okay. So going back to what we said before, in the last chapters of the book, I am trying to share the broader vision for Kook about redemption process. Mm-hmm. But I want to speak about redemption process now in a very practical terms, not in messianic terms. Redemption process means that everything that we lost, everything that was twisted because of the abnormal situation of the nation, 2,000 years of exile, should be restored and go back to its original condition and situation. And that's why, which by the way goes back not just to the exile, but to the beginning of time, the creation, many things in humanity kind of deteriorated this condition, situation of humanity. And our goal is to go back, and that's what we call the tshuva, the tikkun olam, to go back ultimately, ultimately to the highest place possible. And that's how I'm analyzing many of the processes, including science and so on and so forth. Speaking about women issues, if you go back to the way the sages, Chazal, understood story creation based on majority of opinions, the men and the woman, Adam and Chava, were created together. We created equally. They were created, based on the Midrash as Siamese twins connected back to back. And the story of the separation, we have a misunderstanding of the story because of the mistranslation of the ancient Hebrew. Because in the ancient Hebrew, Tzela is a side, like Tzelot HaMishkan, the sides of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, or Tzelot HaMizbeach. When the Torah was translated, they used the contemporary Hebrew, and then Tzela was a rib. But when the Torah says, Vaikach achat mitzalota v'yisgor basar tachtena, it doesn't mean that God took one of the ribs of Adam, one of the sides. Adam was split into two. One side was the Ish, the man, the other side was the Isha, the woman. Each one of them is only half. By the way, that's why under the wedding we make the bracha Yitzira Adam, because only then we are completing the creation of that human being. Each one of them is only half. They were created together equally. When the inequality starts, very simple, in the original sin. Chava initiated the sin, and what was the punishment? That man will dominate. The inequality is not something inherent, rather something that was a result of the original sin. And throughout history, it kept deteriorating. And part of redemption process in that light is equality. When we see women in leadership positions in our times that are contributing so much to society, this is part of Tikkun Olam, that men and women are equal. Does that mean that we have the same roles? Not at all. We have different personalities, but it means that women they today, and I don't have to say like it's so obvious, they have equal abilities to men. So the fact that there's a desire, that feminist desire in depth, and that was the way of Rav Kook, even though Rav Kook did not speak about feminism, it was before his time. But in depth, it comes from that desire to bring the world to play the higher place as it was originally. So does that mean that every claim of equality within halacha is possible? No, we have the halachic tools. We need to analyze every sugya, but the approach, if the approach is realizing that this is something essentially important, it's not just a liberal feminist trend. This is a trend, an ultimate trend of lechatchila, of bringing Judaism and the world to a place of tikkun, of the highest place. Then the approach to analyze every dilemma about women will be completely different. And what is, I think, even more important, and I mentioned this a couple of times in the book, if you ask me, I think the biggest revolution in halacha, like the biggest revolution in halacha, took place in the realm of women learning Torah. Based on halacha, that was a traditional halacha from the days of the Mishnah. Whoever teaches his daughter Torah, his teacher is regarded as if he's teaching her tiflut. What is tiflut? Tiflut is license, it's prostitution. It's very harsh. That was the approach. That's a Shulchan Aruch, that's a halacha. About 100 years ago, a visionary, a woman, Sarah Schneer, came to rabbinical leadership and to the Chavetz Chaim and the Ger Rebbe, and she took them on board, and she told me it's impossible that women go to universities and they study everything except for Torah. we will lose them. And the rabbis cooperated. And they, in that sense, again, in a very slow, very responsible way, halacha is transformed from one side to the other, completely to the other side. Today, there's almost in every Jewish community, regardless of their hashkafa, women learn Torah. Against the Shulchan Aruch. It's against the Shulchan Aruch, almost in every Jewish community. And it succeeded because it was slow, it was responsible, without demonstrations, without provocations. So this is Tikkun Olam. You know, we had just recently Siyum HaShas for women, 3,000 women participating in the Siyum HaShas. This is redemption. This is Geula, literally. And so that's basically what is standing behind my claim. Let's see it as something ideal, something ultimate, something can bring the entire Judaism to a place of redemption, a much better place. And again, it's not an excuse to destroy halacha, God forbid, but it's a motivation to find good solutions within the halachic framework. And that's basically what I'm trying to suggest.
So thank you for that beautiful summary. So we're getting to know each other. I'm a father of 5 daughters and I teach in a number of midrashot. So you can imagine I'm very inspired by what you've said and I'm very involved in some of those programs. I want to just come back to your wider thesis and to quote something which I think reflects back on some of the things you've said. You write, the changes wrought by postmodernism are necessary to free the halacha from the restrictive chains which imprisoned it within 4 cubits. Now, you already referred to Daled Amot Shel Halacha, but what I see from that is, rather than there being a fear of some developments in society, a fear of postmodernism, you see this as bringing a certain freshness to reevaluate some of the rigid, sometimes even stale ways in which we've been doing things, and as you say, nudge towards a sense of redemption. Is that right?
Correct. There are challenges, and I'm definitely not ignoring the challenges. I'm highlighting the challenges. However, it's also an opportunity because the breakdown of dogmatic ways of thinking can bring us much closer to appreciating the fuller, more divine picture. And I want to explain. Now, what is machloket? Dispute. The root of the word machloket is chelek, piece. Because each one, our comprehension is limited. Each one of us can see just one segment of the picture. You know, it can happen to us so many issues. We can argue with a person, can be a relative, a spouse, a colleague. And we see the same picture, the same facts, and it's blowing our minds that why do we disagree? Why can he or she see what I see? Because we have different perspectives. We see just chelek, just piece of, that's why we have machloket. What is shalom? Shalom is shalem, to see the whole picture. There are like many pieces of the puzzle, and the shalom is when we can put all of them together. By the way, we conclude the tefillah every single day with Aleinu L'Shabeach, and the concluding passage of Aleinu L'Shabeach is the prophecy from Zechariah, Vayashem lemelech al kol haaretz, God will be king on all earth. Bayom Hashem echad u'shmo echad. On that day, everything will become one. The oneness, that's a shalem, that's a whole picture. In the future, we'll have the vision to see the whole picture. But as of now, we can see only bits and pieces. Now, the halachic system, in the end of the day, has to bring many times to the determination because people has to follow a way. And like as an example, when halacha was decided according to Bet Hillel, Bet Shammai, in that sense, were overruled. But Bet Shammai has something to contribute to the truth. If we remember, and I mentioned this many times in the book, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim, these and these are the living words of God. Bet Shammai also speak the words of God. So we rejected them and we do not follow Bet Shammai, and we ignore their ways. And there are so many examples of things that throughout history we ignored because we had to be dogmatic because that was the halacha. because we had to have a way. But the fact that today we can think in a different way, we can be more open to many other options. And the fact that I'm right does not mean that you are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It can help us to take the different pieces and build something fuller. So the pattern of thinking in postmodern world, which is exactly the opposite of dogmatic thinking, it's a postmodern thinking. It helps us to break down that rigid framework that forces us to think in a very narrow way and be open to much broader truth. How do we handle this? Well, it's complex. But if we realize, we understand the dangers, but at the very same time we appreciate the benefits, it can bring us to a place where we can work together, even with people that belong to a different camp, belong to a different hashkafa, different community, because we realize that each one of us is just a halakhic, and each one of us is something to contribute. And instead of fighting against each other, we can work together and build something much bigger. In the past, it was impossible. Take Hasidim and Mitnagdim as an example. For years, more than 100 years, they fought against each other. Then they started collaborating. Today, it is so clear that not only there's no contradiction, they're completing the
synergies, right?
It's a synergy. They're complementing each other. And that's just one example, but there's so many examples. So that is the advantage of postmodern world. It's a breakdown of the dogmatic ways of thinking.
Fantastic. I know that we've gone on a little bit longer than planned, so I'm planning to ask just one more question, and then perhaps if there's anything else you want to add, we'll do that. Now, you mentioned your final chapter, and in fact, in your final chapter, you make considerable reference to Rav Kook and also Rav Shagal. And in that final chapter, you address a number of hot topics, and you explain how your thinking as outlined in the book might lead to alternative approaches to these topics. And I want to list them all for people to get a sense of range of what you address there. These include civil marriage in Israel, conversion in Israel, receiving donations from Christians for the state of Israel, grappling with the Agunah problem, women in the synagogue, women singing in the contemporary era, wigs, valid hair covering or a ruse, or the religious community's attitude to members of the LGBT community. Can you choose one of these topics and explain? I know it's very hard to summarize, these are all obviously very important. How you think we need to be approaching the topic differently in our postmodern age?
Okay, I can speak for hours, but I just want to take one issue, which is a huge issue, the issue of Agunah, the Agunah problem. And again, without getting to all the halachic details, as I bring in the tshuva, there are so many options, existing options within the framework of halacha that were supported not just by some poskim, but the majority of poskim. Like one example is forcing a get. Mm-hmm. When the kfiyat get, when a husband is refusing to get a get, utilizing different sanctions. According to most halachic authorities, this is permitted, and there are contemporary rabbis that claim that today we must adopt that approach, and why? And again, it goes back to what we said before about the postmodern world. And these psakim were said, by the way, 20 years ago, before postmodernism was so strong as and imminent as it is today. In the past, rabbis, Beit Din had the power. So we can argue about the issue of Agunah and morality, whatever, but if rabbis decided for whatever reason to be more strict and more stringent with regards to the different possible opinions, halachic opinions, in most cases, unfortunately, the women suffered, but they respected the psak of the rabbis, and before they had a get, they did not move on. We live in a different world today, and we spoke about commitment. Definitely in the non-observant world, but even within the observant world, how many years will women remain in that status of aguna without moving on? I bring up the opinions of Waldenberg, that it's Eliezer, and Rabbi Kapach, who's also a Dayan in the Supreme Rabbinical Court in Israel. They're both saying that in our times, it is impossible to expect that women will respect that psak, and many of them, maybe most of them, will move on. And we are trying maybe to be more stringent and follow a minority of opinions that we fear and we have concern that maybe they're right, and therefore we don't want to break the marriage and give the get. But we are causing exactly the opposite, because we are causing so many issues of the worst sin, one of the 3 worst sins in the Torah, of Gilui Arayot, of adultery. And we are bringing more mamzer into the world. So we think we are more stringent, but we are destroying halacha. So this is an example of something that we need to reconsider as a community. It's not a change that one rabbi can do or one community can do. It's a global change that we need to do as the broader community. And everything is there. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to reform the halacha. We have so many potential solutions to alleviate dependence, especially today, when the moral sensitivity, which is also part, and I analyze this in the book, it's also part of the redemption process, that we are, the moral compass that we have in our times is much more sensitive than in the past. Rabbis should not sleep because there are so many women who are suffering from being a guna, when there's an option to release them from that situation. Maybe not 100% of the cases, but many of them. So again, this is an example of realizing that in our world, in the postmodern world, if there'll not be a paradigm shift in the way we deal halachically with the aguna, we will destroy, it might destroy all the kind of halachic framework of family, of marriage. And many people will not even want to get married. And we see that trend beginning by the Rabbanut, God forbid not to be stuck in that place of aguna.
So I should add, so what you're saying here is, aside from a moral argument, which itself should be evident that no woman should be left in this impossible situation, the developments of our time give further reason to pressure even those who ordinarily be perhaps stricter to say that's not a very wise thing to do, and it's not a very halachic thing to do, for all the reasons you've just outlined.
Correct.
Understood. Okay, I know that we wanted to talk a little bit about community rabbis and the importance of their role and how Psika operates. It's up to you if you want to spend just a few minutes addressing that. Or would you like to do that?
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation, and it's the first time we're meeting, and to meet a colleague and a friend that thinks alike, it's a pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity and the feedback. And just in essence, I'll try to make it very short and concise. We spoke about the gap between the culture and halacha, and halacha that's supposed to serve as a bridge. Today, in many cases, serve as a barrier between people and Torah. But I think, as I mentioned before, we need to have a paradigm shift in the way we transmit halacha, because we have different tools. Some tools that we have in the past do not work anymore, and we have new tools that we need to utilize. And speaking about Rabbanim, there were times in history I bring many examples in the book that the major poskai halacha were the community rabbis.
Mm-hmm.
They were connected to their communities. They were engaged with the people, immersed in their values, culture, and they gave responses that were fitted for their community, their congregation. That's why there's a concept of Mar de Atra, the local rabbi. And there were disputes and different minhagim because there are different communities and different styles and different cultures. Because, what happened in the past 200 years because of all the societal changes of enlightenment and reform movement and Zionism and Hasidut, and many reasons which I mentioned in the book, the major power of Psikat Halacha shifted to the yeshivot to protect the halacha, and it definitely was significant, was important at the time. However, in our times, the gap, the cultural gap between the world of yeshivot, many of them, maybe even most of them, without generalizing,
Mm-hmm.
and the world of communities is almost unbridgeable. It's a different culture, it's a different style, a different language. And I think that today, speaking about transmitting the halacha in a way that people can accept and appreciate and trust the halachic system, we need and must empower, train, mentor community rabbis to become poskai halacha. And to give poskai halacha is not just about if something is straight, about the Sarei Chalav, writing the response and writing a tshuva on complicated matters, because Rabbanim, they understand the people, they understand the language, and they can transmit the halacha in a way that people can listen, people can accept, and can be more sensitive to the needs of the people, to where people are, and give halacha that will not push people away, rather bring them closer to Torah. The way of Hillel, ohev et habriot, love the people. That's the approach of Rabbanei Kila, love the people, bring them closer to Torah. So it's about the Rabbanim, and not less important, and with this I will end, it's also about the communities. And we started, you gave your reflection as a rabbi, and my reaction was, well, that was exactly my goal for rabbis, but the major goal of the book is for the people, for the balabatim, for people who are not rabbis, maybe, for leaders and people or even simple followers, to respect or trust in halacha, and most importantly, to realize that all of us, we can make the change. It's not just the rabbis. I'm speaking a lot in the book about the power of tzibur, about koach tzibur. Let's take the Shulchan Aruch as an example. How come the Shulchan Aruch became the supreme halachic authority, more than the Rambam, more than the Rosh? Why? It's very simple, and it's because it was the first halachic composition after the sealing of the Gemara that was broadly accepted by all Jewish communities. It was a printing press and the gloss of the Ramah that enabled this to happen. But bottom line, and that was the vision of Shulchan Aruch, it was the first time that something was broadly accepted. So the tzibur made the Shulchan Aruch who he was. He was a great Talmid Chacham, great rabbi, but it was the tzibur. We, the tzibur, can help to shape the future of halacha. These are the rabbis we will empower, the rabbis we will follow. And if we spoke about the need to have Rabbanei Kilot, we need the tzibur to bring a Rabbanei Kilot, to empower them, to give them the tools, and to follow them. And we can create the change, the need to change together. It's not changing the halacha, it's changing it's shifting the paradigm of the way we transmit halacha, and understanding the tools of the new world and utilizing them and working within that framework for the future. I said at the beginning, many times we perceive we associate rabbinical leadership with rabbinical supervision. Mm-hmm. It's true, that's part of the role of rabbis, to supervise, to protect, but now more than ever, we need a rabbinical supervision, a vision for the future of halacha, for the future of the Jewish people. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, and thank you for sharing so much. These are many topics that those who know me know that I've been thinking about and teaching about, and it's so great to have a book that brings so much wisdom and case studies and insight, and as you say, as vision, bring together the world of Halacha, a recognition of the centrality of Medinat Israel, and a desire to make the world a better place, and pushing us, nudging us, and giving us a pathway, Halacha, towards redemption. If listeners want to purchase a copy of your book, how do they do so? I think there may be some offer available right now. Is that right?
Correct. So everyone who lives in North America, we are now selling the books 50%. Unfortunately, we cannot offer this around the world because of the coronavirus. All the books are stuck still in America. We were unable to send them all over yet. However, if you live outside of America, the easiest way, it's available on Amazon, and you can order it directly from Amazon. That'll be the safest way to get the book. But we will share with you a link to the discount if you live in North America, and we are now offering 50% discount.
Fantastic. And just to remind everybody, in English, the book is The Narrow Halachic Bridge, A Vision of Jewish Law in the Postmodern Age. And if you prefer, in Hebrew, Gesher Halacha, Psikat Halacha, Bodor Postmoderni. Thank you so much, Rav Ronen.
Thank you, Rav Johnny. It was a pleasure to be together. All the very best.
You too.